welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, a lot of fun little things to talk about. Shorter episode as we're working on some other things. If we're talking about the usual housekeeping, Japanimation Station, still going strong. Last week we had our Love, Chunibyo, and Other Delusions Season 2 episode. This week, concurrent with this podcast, you're hearing our Myriad Colors Phantom World episode. Underrated show, right, Sean?
Yes, absolutely.
So we are talking about that. Not the best show in the world, but a really fucking good one. Go watch it. It's fun. Don't be a snob about it. Anyway, over on JonathanLack.com, I finished the Yu-Gi-Oh! Kill Count project, so that's all up. We had a review of Whisper of the Heart from Miyazaki Madness. I reviewed Challengers, the tennis three-way movie, which is a pithy way of describing it, but also a completely accurate way of describing it. And
I know exactly, Jonathan, the movie you're talking about, because whenever I see a picture online of, like, there's a review or something on a website, the picture they use is Zendaya and the two dudes sitting on the edge of a bed. It's the only picture anyone uses for that movie. I just see it as, like, is this a movie or is this a porn film? It's just the, like, first 3 minutes of a porn where it's a threesome, at the bottom it said like interracial threesome. I'd be like, yeah, and it was on Pornhub. I'm like, yeah, that's the title of the movie, I guess.
The movie is not pornographic, to be clear, and that scene goes in unexpected directions, but I think that's partially, Sean, because this movie premiered at like Telluride or something, like some big festival last year, and I think that was like the only promo photo out from the studio for a long time. So it's kind of like Killers of the Flower Moon only had that one picture of Leo and Lily Gladstone at the table, and he's looking up at the ceiling, and that was the only picture for like 2 years that was released, and so it was on every review, including mine. Because my website also has that picture that you say looks pornographic up as well. So there you go.
Yes, it is just that weird phenomenon where I know very little about that movie other than that one image, which I feel like it seems like that tells you a lot you need to know about that movie.
It's a great movie. You should see it. You should listen to the soundtrack, fucking Reznor Ross score. It's incredible. But we're not here to talk about that. One thing I wanted to talk about right off the bat today is my last little piece of housekeeping, which is I had something else published this week, but it wasn't on my website. It was on the Criterion Collection's website.
Yeah.
I have been sitting on this for a while. Did I tell you about this, Sean? I forget.
No, I had absolutely no idea.
I only told a couple of people, so I forgot if I had told you. Most of our conversation happens on the air, and I couldn't say anything about it on the air, obviously, because it would go out to the public. And this was secret. But yes, I was invited to write an essay for the Criterion Collection, which I don't know anyone who listens to our podcast who doesn't know what Criterion is, but maybe if you don't live in the U.S. or something, I don't know. It's the big boutique label that sells, foreign and classic films in the U.S. It's the most prestigious, film collection label here that puts out Blu-rays and DVDs. I mean, their stuff goes all the way back to Laserdisc days. And they also do a lot of writing. All their, editions come with an essay inside the Blu-ray box, but also they do a lot of writing online in their Criterion Current magazine that is also in hand with their Criterion Channel streaming collection. And they wrote to me because they were doing in April... I think I heard from them in March, and it was middle of March, because I first turned this in on April 1st. And they were planning a Makoto Shinkai streaming series on the Criterion Channel, the streaming service, where they were streaming all of his movies up through Your Name. So everything up through his big, international breakthrough movie. Mm-hmm. And they had seen, actually, my review of Suzume, his most recent film, on the Weekly Stuff Wordcast, on my Substack. And in that piece, I think because I frame Suzume very much in the context of Shinkai's larger career, they liked that piece and they wanted something similar about one of the films that was in this series. And they asked me if I would like to do that. And I'm like, fuck yeah, I would like to do that. I would like to write for Criterion. That's a bucket list item for me. Mm-hmm. So they gave me a list of the movies. It was kind of funny. They said, you can write about any of these. Just please don't write about Your Name. Everyone knows Your Name. And I'm like, don't worry. I wasn't going to write about Your Name. Again, everyone's written about Your Name. But they had everything else. And I... in true Weekly Suit Gundam fashion, Sean, I wrote about the one movie Shinkai has ever made with giant robots in it. I decided to write about his 2002 short film, Voices of a Distant Star. This was all very serendipitous because I had done some work on this film for my Giant Robots on Screen class at the University of Iowa a couple years ago. So I had some notes from it then. and then where I screened that movie alongside the film edit of Hideaki Anno's Gunbuster, which if you know those two works, he pulled a lot from Gunbuster in different ways, including that they both have kind of this time dilation plot. There's some other references here and there. There's also references to Macross. UN Spacey is in there, which I think is funny because that's the Macross space organization. But anyway, so I had some material from that, and then I had done a whole watch through of Shinkai's entire filmography maybe last summer or 2 summers ago as I was researching my dissertation, because I thought I would write about his stuff in my diss more, and I wound up not. There's not really any Shinkai in my dissertation. Not because I don't like his films, it's just there's a lot of stuff I like that is not in my dissertation because it didn't fit for one reason or another. But I had all these notes, and I had some thoughts on his whole career, so I thought it came together pretty well. So I was able to write a piece, and this is kind of what they wanted, focusing on one movie, in this case Voices of a Distant Star, but putting it in the context of his entire career. And that's what I did. And it was a really lovely working experience. The person who emailed me was the editor over at the Criterion Current, and, gave me some info. I wrote a draft, sent it. We had a couple back and forths. It was a really nice editing process. I think it made for a really good final piece. I don't usually get to work with an editor going back and forth this rigorously, but that was nice. And again, I hadn't told many people, so when it finally landed on April 24th, I think that was this Tuesday or Wednesday, it was so cool, and I'm looking at it right now, and there's a page on the Criterion Collection that has my name on it and my writing. And this podcast today, I kind of wanted to bring it up and do a tiny little victory lap, because it's really fucking cool.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I was shocked. I saw it on Twitter because it was during lunch at school, at my job, which is at a school. My little tiny, what is technically a 30-minute lunch, but in reality, it's like a 20-minute lunch because, that's how that works. And I brought up Twitter, and that was the first thing that popped up. I was like, "What? What the fuck? What's happening?" And then I read your thing while I was eating a sandwich, and it was very good. I was vaguely aware of this short film, but I have not seen it. I really want to check it out. I mean, I'm sure it seems like a thing that potentially would come up on a future Japanimation station eventually. So who knows? Yeah. But yes, it was a very cool piece. Yes, very informative.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it was fun, and it was just, if people, I put on jonathanlight.com, there's a link to the Criterion piece, and in that link, I also I took a picture of it's not actually my entire Criterion collection. I couldn't get all of that in one picture, but it's the 2 bookshelves that it's split across. It's actually split across 3 total, because I have a separate shelf where I have a bunch of the big box sets, like the Zatoichi set, and some of their Martin Scorsese World Cinema Project sets. I own a lot of Criterion discs. I've been collecting Criterion discs for, 15 years. The first one I ever bought was Seven Samurai. I think that's... I wonder if that is the most common first Criterion edition.
I think that's mine also, because I think my parents got me that when I was 15 or something like that. And I think that's probably the first Criterion Collection thing I owned.
Yeah, it was the first one I owned. It's spine number 2, so there's a reason why a lot of people, it's their first one. I mean, the version we have it's been re-released many times as spine number 2. I think we both have probably the Blu-ray version, but it is, so they have, and again, they do all of Kurosawa, all of Ozu, every French director. If you want French cinema, the Criterion Collection is definitely there for you, but Japanese cinema is also probably their other biggest, national cinema they release, so a lot of that. They don't have any anime in the collection yet. I think they should correct that at some point. To be fair, a lot of the anime rights are already, eaten up by other companies, but there's plenty of anime that doesn't have a home. I think Criterion should do a little bit of that. I'd love to write for it if they ever do that. But no, so obviously it has been a giant bucket list item to do anything with them at all, let alone write a big essay that goes up on their site and celebrates a really cool film series, because Shinkai is not my favorite anime director, and I think I find his early work more interesting than I do love it. I think I don't love any of his films until we get to Your Name, and I think his most recent 3 films have been great. But I think he's a really fascinating example of someone finding their voice over time, which is part of what my piece was about. But a lot of those early films of his were not commercially available in the US in easy form for a long time until last year. G-Kids put out 3 Blu-rays collecting 3 of his early features and then several of his early shorts, including Voices of a Distant Star. And now those are streaming over on the Criterion channel. And I'm just, as someone who, and I know you're the same way, Sean, remembers the days of piecing together Dragon Ball Z on afternoons on Cartoon Network, or from single, 3-episode DVD volumes, whenever you can just say, oh yes, this place has the entire filmography of this director, go watch it. I'm like, that's very cool. It's because at a certain point, it was not easy to recommend go watch Voices of a Distant Star. When I first watched it, I pirated it from somewhere because there was no DVD, and it was some weird fan sub. And now it's over on the Criterion channel.
Yeah, so once upon a time, it was like, that was like a summer project, was let me find ways to watch all of this person's movies or all of this like weird TV show and stuff like that. Yeah, now it's like, okay, which one of the gajillion streaming services do I have to fork money over to just get the whole thing in one big batch?
Yeah. So anyway, this was very cool, a nice break from some of my dissertation writing. Not that I've really ever taken a break this semester. I've been working on that on the side. But
yeah, it was a nice break from writing about anime to write about this anime. Yes.
No, I mean, there's literally, I think they don't have footnotes on Criterion, so there's a quote in here. And the citation was literally, and the quote, there was a part of my dissertation where I had this quote, and I just lifted it and put it into the document. And of course, it was a very long footnote because the citation was multiple layers of citation. Anyway, so no, it all goes hand in hand. It was actually nice to be able to offload, because some of this was notes from my disc that I have not used there, and getting to offload that into this little piece that I wrote was very nice. And something that came together and was published relatively quickly, unlike my dissertation, which has taken a long time. But I am close to the end on that, I should say. I am writing the final section of the final chapter as we speak. Not as we speak. I'm not writing it while we're on the podcast, Sean, although all the Word docs that it is going into are open in other tabs, because my desktop has been a mess of Microsoft Word tabs for a while now.
Well, hopefully we can watch something new on Japanimation Station to force you to just try to jam another chapter in there or something, because I know that your dissertation has evolved dramatically over the course of us doing our anime podcast series.
You'll be happy to know, Sean, Myriad Colors Phantom World is now in the dissertation.
Yes.
It's in a footnote technically, but there was a part where I was writing about, I'd already written this sentence, but it was about storyboarding and the timing nature of storyboarding, and that sometimes it's done with stopwatches. And I went, I can't not do it. And if you've listened to the Japanimation Station episode, there's a bit in Myriad Colors Phantom World where Lulu, the little fairy girl character, talks about having a friend who does storyboarding and does karaoke because it improves their rhythm as a storyboard artist. And I put that in there just as to enhance the connection between rhythm and storyboarding, and also because that quote is very funny.
Yes. I'm glad that Myriad Colors Phantom World made it in there. Hopefully we can just get a couple more Japanimation stations just jammed in there before the end.
There's a lot, they're more on the periphery, but Garden of Sinners and Fate Stay Night are referenced in this chapter. I'm more focusing on Kimetsu no Yaiba of the UFO table stuff, but obviously if you bring up Kimetsu, you might as well bring up those as well. They're all aesthetically of a piece, certainly. There's no Kimetsu without Fate and Garden of Sinners.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, anyway. So, yeah, these have been Jonathan's writing adventures. I am published in the Criterion Collection. If anything happens to me, I can die happy. I achieved that.
Yes, it's a hell of a thing.
It's very fun. All right. But let's just shoot the shit a little bit, Sean. What else have you been up to?
It's been mostly, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and also just, work stuff of where I'm finally outside the shadow of the STAR test, what is it? I think it's State of Texas Aptitude of the Readiness something test. It's some incredibly dumb acronym that obviously exists because Texas has their Lone Star thing they love. That's the state test in Texas, which Texas takes incredibly seriously. They are very anal about their state test. It is a graduation requirement for students that they have to pass the STAR test for each of their subjects. And in freshman year, which is what I teach, they do an English one, they do a geography one, they do a biology, they do an English, biology, and algebra. And they are done with all of those, because I have to say, the most mind-numbing experience I've ever had in my life is having to quote-unquote actively proctor a test, which is an incredibly oxymoronic phrase. Which
what the
really
fuck does that mean?
It means sitting in a room and staring at 25 children trying to answer 56 algebra questions, and poking them if they try to fall asleep, and telling them, if you fall asleep, it is going to log you out of your test, and please don't do that, because it's going to be a pain in the ass to get you back into this test. So please just don't fall asleep.
Do they all do it on the computer now?
Yes, it's all banded through the computer. And yes, because the Texas takes it so seriously that they do like really strongly emphasize that you can't have your computer on, like the teacher can't have their computer on, can't have their cell phone on, like no devices that can connect to the internet. You're not supposed to read. You're not supposed to be writing anything other than something on a sticky note. You have to be there, and you have to be looking at them. And that's what you have to be looking at them, but you can't look at any of the problems on the test, because that's forbidden knowledge. You can't know that shit. So sometimes how you have to actively proctor the test and make sure they're taking the test and not cheating without ever seeing the test itself is how it's like pitched to you. And it's the insanity of the testing system in America. But we're done. And I actually get to like teach things again. I went a whole week where all we did was sit there and watch students take tests, or just show a movie, because I'm not going to try to teach a class in the like 1 day between these whole day-long tests that they're taking. And it's over. It's fucking over.
I'm happy for you. What was the movie?
Gnomeo and Juliet, because we're getting into Romeo and Juliet.
I forgot you show that one.
It's an easy thing to throw on, that they fucking eat that shit up. And I get to do some grading while they, watch this 2011 children's film adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Although there was one fun class where, if people have not seen Gnomeo and Juliet, spoilers for the movie, at the end, they do a fake out where it's going to be like, oh, is it going to end like the play where the two gnomes die? And then, of course, because it's a kid's movie and it doesn't have, balls, it's like, no, they don't die. They miraculously live. But one class ended and the timing of it was so perfect, of where it's just, I had to stop it because they were about to be dismissed right when like the two parents on either side are grieving the supposed death of Gnomeo and Juliet. And as far as that class knows, that's just the end of that movie, is that no, this is a hardcore children's film where the two leads die a horrible death in an elaborate lawnmower accident, and they're shattered and it's over. And that's it. That's all she wrote. Gnomeo and Juliet, they're gone.
Wow. Okay, I'm only looking this up now. I guess in my head, I've never seen a trailer for this movie. I know nothing about Gnomeo and Juliet. I just kind of assumed it was, for some reason in my head, that it was the actual like Shakespearean language, but with a bunch of like cartoon characters.
No.
That would be so funny. No, of course it's 84 minutes. Of course it can't do that. That would be very hard.
No, it's a like DreamWorks-esque,
Yes.
Here's a bunch of random pop culture references, and musical numbers and stuff. Yes, it is not. It is loosely connected to the plot of Romeo and Juliet. There's like a couple of moments that they pull, like Tybalt dies, but there's no like Mercutio equivalent. There are like very huge, substantial parts of the plot of Romeo and Juliet that are not represented in that movie at all. But
they don't do Queen Mab.
No, they don't do the Queen Mab speech, which honestly, that would be good material. I don't think the people who made Gnomeo and Juliet know enough about Romeo and Juliet to have done the good version of the Romeo and Juliet kids movie. But it's connected enough and it's just like slop enough that I feel fine showing it, because the thing is, I don't want to show them something that they actually need to pay attention to. I have to show them something that I don't care whether they paid attention to it or not, because it's in between them taking these two mammoth, ridiculous 58 question tests on a computer.
It's a break for them, right? It's a reward of like, hang out with your friends and watch a movie.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Gnomeo and Juliet's right in the sweet spot of where I can justify it if a assistant principal asks me like, why are you just showing a movie today? Well, it's connected to Romeo and Juliet. So it's got some justification for it, but also it's so meaningless that they're the students that don't show up because the attendance is notably lower on the day where they're not taking the test. I don't have to worry about those kids and having to catch them up. So it's, I don't like the movie. I don't think it's a particularly good movie. But I appreciate that it exists because it's very convenient for my specific purposes.
This gives me a different perspective on like our teachers when we were kids, Sean, because like they would show us shitty movies like this. And I guess in my head, I always thought, man, my teachers have terrible taste in movies. Why do they like these terrible movies? And I'm like, no, now that I think about it, of course not. They're in your position.
Yes.
They're trying to find something that, A, will not get them in trouble for showing, B, is like low rent enough that everyone can like not really focus on, like it's a different assignment than like they weren't in film school assigning stuff for intro to film.
Yes, no, I'm not trying to sort of expand their horizons by showing some, like higher level film that's going to like really, it's like, most of the kids are going to be absolutely bored to tears by this because they just don't care. But there's going to be the two kids who are like, hell yeah. No, I need the lowest common denominator of films. And it turns out that is exactly what Gnomeo and Juliet is.
You know what? It's still probably better than Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet.
You know what? That's not a good movie overall, but if you pick a couple of scenes of Romeo plus Juliet, there's some good scenes. That's the way to watch that movie. Just watch their adaptation of Act 1, Scene 5, which is the when Romeo and Juliet meet. That scene's great. Oh yeah,
that's a good scene.
That's a very good scene. You just don't want to show most of the other parts of it because
you don't want to show the parts where they open their mouths and talk. That's what you don't want to do.
Yes.
The thing that's good about that scene is that it's wordless as they see each other through the aquarium.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that is the thing. And then you get the one shot of Ant-Man in there in Paul Rudd because he's Paris in that movie, and then all the kids are like, "Oh my God, it's Ant-Man!" I'm like, yes, it's Ant-Man, and he has not aged at all because I know that's a meme for some actors. It's true for Paul Rudd. It's like disgusting. It's gross. I just don't understand it. It's inhuman. He doesn't look that different in Romeo plus Juliet from 1996 that he does in Ant-Man.
It is so weird for me to think that Paul Rudd, the first association would be Ant-Man, but like that makes sense for a younger generation.
Yes.
But like I knew him from a bunch of stuff before Ant-Man, and I'm guessing he probably isn't too jazzed about that either, but that's fine. The last one flopped. He probably doesn't ever have to do it again.
Yeah, and I'm sure he made an absolutely ungodly amount of money doing those movies, so I'm sure he's very happy about that.
His children and their children's children will live very well.
Exactly.
So all thanks to Ant-Man. No, that's great. Are you allowed to still show the Franco Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet, or are the 5 seconds of nudity is that like disallowed now?
I would not show that scene in my school.
Okay. People would freak.
Yes, but I would show, and I do show their adaptation of Act 3, Scene 1, which is the big fight with Mercutio in Tybalt, where shit goes down. That's probably the best version of that sequence I've seen in any Romeo and Juliet movie, because it captures the sense of they're joking around, and then it stops becoming a joke at a certain point, and it gets very real, and that shift is incredibly well done in that film. Most other adaptations, they don't capture the kind of the comic energy of the beginning of that sequence because they're just thinking of it's a tragic, sad scene where these two characters are going to get killed. But it's supposed to be a thing that happens effectively by accident that then drives everything to its tragedy, which is what makes the sequence good. And Zeffirelli does a good job with that. But yes, I would not show. I mean, I wouldn't show any just one Romeo and Juliet movie all the way through because I think that's a bad way to try to deal with that and teaching it to the kids.
Yeah, but we watched that in school, and one of my favorite tweets ever is a couple of years ago. I don't remember who tweeted this, it's been years. But a couple of years ago, Criterion Collection again, they put out the Franco Zeffirelli Romeo and Juliet, which had never been on anything but old-ass DVD, which was really cool, because that movie is great. That's a classic.
It's very good.
And so I'm glad it's on Criterion now. But when that came out, someone said, when it was announced, someone on Twitter said, are they going to have a mode that simulates your teacher furiously running to the TV to cover up Olivia Hussey's boobs with her folder? Which I was like, oh, that's a universal experience. I remember vividly you and I in 9th grade in English, and that, because it's a brief flash of nudity, and everyone in the class goes, oh, and it's so scandalous. Of course, there's nothing actually wrong with it, but yeah.
Well, the only thing that is kind of wrong with it is Olivia Hussey was 15 or something when they made that movie.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
There's a little bit of looking back on it, how informed could her consent have been and that kind of thing. But nudity in a vacuum is like whatever, and especially like that level, like totally whatever, you barely see a nipple. And I think what's funny is that then that sequence is then followed up by like a sustained 2 full minutes of Romeo's ass right in the middle of the screen. And it's so funny to me that it's like, it's the nipples that are like you can't, oh my God, this like, but we can just stare at this dude's ass for a fucking minute. And nobody really cares.
For her, it's not actually even a sexual scenario. It's her just getting out of bed.
Yes.
For him, it is, like, as you say, 2 solid minutes of the camera lovingly looking at his ass. And I think he was a minor, too. So it's, you know, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, and he's waxing poetic about birds and shit. Yeah. That's what I do every morning. Every morning I get up, just full nude, stare out the window with my hands on my hips, and I just start speaking iambic pentameter about the fucking lark.
To be clear, though, I do think that is probably one of the best portrayals of Romeo because of that. That is something Romeo would do. That is just, I think it is implicit in Shakespeare's text that Romeo gives a lot of his soliloquies butt naked.
Oh, yes.
He is that kind of character. We have gone on way too much of a tangent with this, Sean.
Hey, this has been my life for the past couple of weeks is because what do I have to do while watching them do this other than sit there and think about Romeo and Juliet endlessly? Because it's like, you know, it's this weird sense when you're doing these tests of where I'm teaching and then your teaching is just paused for an entire week while this test shit happens. And you're just like, I've never have I been more prepared for a lesson than teaching the prologue in Act 1, Scene 1 for Romeo and Juliet, which was the lesson after we finished the test. I'm like, oh my God, I've been thinking about how to structure this lesson for an entire week. It is like timed perfectly. Every single part of it was just like absolutely lockstep, because normally you know your lesson planning is I had like 15 minutes and I wrote it, you know, more or less on the back of a napkin and am praying that it actually works. This is like this is like the first day of school level of I have prep time for this dumb fucking lesson.
All right. Well, Sean, I am glad you're done with testing.
So am I.
How far are you in Final Fantasy? I'm just curious if you have any more thoughts on that.
I think I'm about where you were last time we talked about it, because I'm underneath the golden saucer. My compatriots have been captured by a goofy man doing a Michael Jackson impersonation, and I have to go get some chocobo drugs. I've got to go get those greens for a chocobo so it can get high and do a race or something.
That is the worst part of the game so far that I have played. It is like an hour-long fetch quest that is complete. It is like such old-school anime filler. I almost expect the robot from DBZ to show up from the Gohan episode. Yeah. Like, it is the most like, we just need to pad for time. So here, Cloud, go get some chocobo greens to do a chocobo race. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'll say, like, you know, I feel like I feel about the game the exact way that you did last time we talked about it, because this was about where you were at, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe a little further, but yeah, basically.
Yeah, where it's like I enjoy the playing of the game, generally speaking, quite a bit. Like, I'm enjoying the combat. I'm enjoying, you know, having like some new party members like Yuffie and stuff definitely like brings some new energy to the combat. But there is a sort of tedium that comes with the overall structure of the game, where I think there's like a weird pacing issue, particularly where this is at. And I feel like we're about to get like beyond this thing and into like what the game was like early on. Because early on, the game establishes a structure that's very clear, and I enjoyed, where you have, okay, here's your checklist open world thing. Is it kind of open world slop? Yes, but it's a checklist with a range of different activities, and I do the activities, it checks it off, and I get a little, you know, XP, and I get a little materia and shit, and it's like, I enjoyed that. You know, it's almost kind of nice in a weird way to go back to that kind of open world structure, a little bit more old school Ubisoft thing. That's a bit kind of like 2016-ish, you know. I feel like ever since Breath of the Wild and some of those games, we've kind of moved beyond that open world structure. And there's something nice about going back to something that's so purely a checklist. And I actually enjoyed it. And so you have that, an area that does all of that, and you have some side quests, all of that. And then you finish those if you're doing all the side stuff, which I think you should, because it's fun and it's not that long. And then you go into the Mithril Caves and you do like maybe an hour-long dungeon sequence. You come out of that and you're in a new open world area with a new list of objectives with some variants. There's a new chocobo that climbs up the walls and all that kind of stuff. And you do that stuff, and then you go to Junon and you do the, this big long sequence. And at that point, the pacing of the game goes absolutely fucking bonkers, because it's been like a week and a half since I finished that second open world area, and you don't get a proper open world area again until I think a little bit after where I'm at, because there's a little tiny one. There's a little tiny one after you go to Costa del Sol, but it's like 30 minutes. It's only maybe like a third of the objectives in that region you do, and then you have to go through a whole other big sequence. And it's just like how much time you are on rails going through the Junon and doing the whole, big march thing, and then you have to go fight your way to the boat after the march, and then you're on the boat and you do a tournament, and then you have a boss fight, then you go to Costa del Sol, you do a bunch of mini games, then you get a little tiny bit of open world stuff, but then immediately you're funneled into climbing up this fucking mountain and going down through this other mine and going on these rails, and it's like this long sequence. Then you go to the fucking Golden Saucer and you do a bunch of mini games at the Golden Saucer, and then after that you go below the Golden Saucer, and now here's some more mini games. It's like, why did you open up the game with this sense of a very particular kind of structure focused around open world hub areas that have these kinds of side activities measured on this checklist that give you certain kinds of upgrades like summons and these repeatable things if you go and you capture a chocobo in each region? It's like really weird that you do that 2 times in quick succession, and then you go like 15 hours without doing that again. It's like the next time I go and do a bad chocobo stealth mission, I might actually enjoy it because it's been so long, because I only have done 2 of those and I played the game for like 30 hours. It's really weird that they didn't put a bigger open world section around the Costa del Sol stuff and have that there and then lead into everything at the Golden Saucer. It's just, it's wild because it's so much more structured like Final Fantasy VII Remake, just with more mini games. That's what this whole section of the game is, and it's almost like the length of Final Fantasy VII Remake. And it's pretty funky the way the game's paced in this stretch.
Well, and it continues to be funky because then, Sean, once you're out of the part you're in now, you get the rest of that open world area that was from Costa del Sol, and you're able to loop back around and finish that. That transitions seamlessly into Gongaga. The 2 areas actually touch. And then that whole open area you have, the Gongaga story section is very minimal. It's very brief. And you can get through, if you didn't do any of the open world stuff in Gongaga, I bet you could get from entering that region to getting to the next region in 30 minutes. It's that kind of right away. And then the next region is Cosmo Canyon, which is also open to you. So then there's just 3 in a row of tons of stuff. And it did give me this weird kind of fatigue because I got a little fatigued on the non-open world stuff. And then I binged all of these subsequent open worlds and I got fatigued on that. And then where I am right now, Sean, is I'm in Cosmo Canyon. I got to the actual city of Cosmo Canyon. The story stuff there is very nice, but then it funnels you into this unskippable dungeon with Red 13 that has a bunch of really bad, tacked on mechanics. And I'm playing Crisis Core right now. Is what happened. I will go back. I'm going to finish it. But here's what happened. It's not just that anything the game did specifically. I am now 50 hours into Rebirth. Look, it takes a lot for a game not to fatigue you at 50 hours, right? There are games I love that fatigue me. Persona games sometimes fatigue me 50 hours in, right? This is not unheard of. But my brother had wanted to play Crisis Core. He didn't want to spend money on it, and then I realized, I just own Crisis Core on Switch, and I wanted to play it again on PS5, so I don't need my Switch cart. So I just literally put it in the mail. I got it in an envelope. I dropped the cart in the envelope, put a stamp on it, and mailed it because Switch carts are tiny. And I was like, this is easy. So Thomas is playing that, and he's been talking to me about it, and he loved it. And so I just kept hearing about it. And one night, I failed another objective with Red 13. I was just like, I could be playing Crisis Core right now. And I just shut off the game and I went and started that. And I haven't been able to stop. I've played 5 hours of that. And I love that game so fucking much. But anyway, I need to go back. I want to finish Rebirth. I want to see how they muck up the story at the end, all that stuff, because my brother keeps telling me, like, you have to finish it. I need to talk to someone about this. So something exciting must happen, Sean. But yeah, it's a weird game.
Yeah, it is a very weird game because it's like, because I feel exactly like you last time we talked about it, where it's like, I want to say, it's like, I do enjoy it. Like, I'm having fun playing it. Like, some of the mini games I enjoy, and a lot of the combat stuff I'm enjoying, and obviously the character writing is very good. I love Queen's Blood. I'm all about that.
Rocks.
That's maybe the best part of the whole game.
That section on the boat is great. You've got all the jazz in the different Queen's Blood tournament sections. You've got Red 13's big scene. It's outstanding.
Yeah, and it's almost like that whole sequence is so much better than what you actually get once you get to Costa del Sol, that like the Costa del Sol section just feels very tedious, and like it is the most a video game has ever replicated a bad beach episode of an anime I've ever seen, where it's like so obvious that the whole point is just to get the girls in beaches and kind of ogle at them, that I was honestly surprised that it wasn't slightly more sexual when the robot, like, there's a whole thing where Hojo has his robots come and they like capture your party members, and it's like that is also the thing that happens at every single swimsuit episode, but sometimes it's like a big octopus monster and it has some sex jokes there, and I was like, man, they're like half a step away from just being a bad beach OVA or something for a random 2013 rom-com anime. And yeah, it's just a weird thing where there's so much good stuff in the game, but man, some of like the overall structure and the package that they put it around in the story that they are just sort of, kicking off down the horizon every opportunity they get, like it makes it a very frustrating game to play. Because I just want my fucking checklist again. I want my checklist again, although I also want to just murder Chadley and replace him with a better character, because if there's one Achilles heel to the open world stuff in the game, yes, it's that they have anchored it to the most annoying, dumb, just like not just annoying, boring character. Like Chadley, yes, he's so boring, and he will do this thing sometimes where you go up to him because you want to spend your points to get some materia or do your fucking combat challenge or whatever to get some materia. Because materia is like the important thing about leveling up in the game, is the thing that gives you your powers, and he gives you most of the good materia in the game. So it's like I go do that, and then I exit and start to walk away, and then he goes like, oh, well, Cloud, it seems like, you haven't been getting a whole bunch of world points lately. I'm like, what are you talking? I just spent an hour. I did everything. In this whole region for you, you little bastard. And clearly, like, that dialogue, because it's like 30 seconds of dialogue. It's not like a one sentence. He gives this whole fucking soliloquy about the fact that apparently you haven't been getting enough points for him, but it's not even attached to whether or not you've been getting points. It just seems like a random thing he will say sometimes, and it is the most annoying thing a video game character I think has ever done, because it's like, I am doing it. I'm doing it for me, not for you, because I hate your stupid little ass. Leave me alone. It's like, how could they not have just, it's cheap or something, but just give me a cute little girl or something, just give me, a little mascot character, a little teddy bear man or something, give me something. It doesn't have
Chadley
to be a
character. He built himself a girlfriend who does the combat. She's way better. Why can't she be the person I talk to? I like girl Chadley.
Give me a character with some amount of personality to anchor all this stuff to. Why does it have to be little I'm Chadley. And that's his whole character. He's just Chadley. He's just this little Chadley boy. It's the game would be about 50% better if they just replaced him with anything. I would even give me their weird, deformed, scary Moogles that are not what Moogles are supposed to look like. But I'll take it. I'll take your little weird koala bear motherfuckers in this game over Chadley, please.
I mean, honestly, there's a different version of this where Keshi could have been the Chadley figure who's like helping you out in the open world instead of being like a combat partner, and that would have been better because their take on that character is so fun. But
yes,
yeah,
you could do that. You could do the girl that looks like Marie from Persona 4 the Golden with the blue hat. I remember she was in the first game, and she pops up in some of the side quests. Like, I don't love that character, but she's got more of a personality. Like, just give me... There are so many characters with huge, ridiculous personalities in this game. You know, you've got the dude voiced by Yamadera Koichi who runs Golden Saucer. This guy's... He's absolutely fucking insane and ridiculous. Please, give me him. That would be so much more fun. Have this dude just flex and do, like, you know, make his pecs dance at me when I go and get my materia from him. I would love that. Compared to Chadley just sitting there and fucking negging me about not getting him enough fucking world points.
Okay, Sean, I'm going to pitch something to you. DLC, you can replace Chadley in FF7 Rebirth. How much would be your upper bound on paying for that? And it gives you a selection of characters. You can... Everything where Chadley would appear, it is now a different selection if you can pick from like 4 characters.
I'd easily pay at least $10 for that. Like, legitimately, I would...
Yes.
Like, give it to me like the probably the greatest piece of DLC in the history of video games, even though I haven't actually played this game. I just know the DLC's existence, which is for the remake or the re-release of Catherine, where you can buy the DLC and it's got a list of like basically every popular modern voice actress in the Japanese voice acting industry that you can swap in their voices. So if you want to have Sawashiro Miike be Catherine, or you want to have Horia Yui be Catherine, or Hayami Saudi, or, you know, just pick any popular voice actress. It's like all of them. It's ridiculous. Fucking give me that, man. I'd pay like $30 for that. It's like, I mean, because then you could switch it around. Be like, oh, today is a Takahashi Rie day for me. I'm going to have her be the person who's the little mascot character. Then now it's going to be a Swashiro day. You know, like, I mean, most days would be a Swashiro day. But, you know, that would be great. I'd love that DLC, please.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, weird. Crisis Core, Final Fantasy VII Reunion, fucking banger. Everyone go play that if you haven't. Yeah. Holy crap. Anyway, there was one other thing I wanted to talk about today, Sean, that I've been up to. Because we just talked about my game stuff. Although I will also say, I talked a couple weeks ago on the show about the Analog Pocket, and I have now played one full game on that. I did get... I played my cart of Metroid Zero Mission, back to front, played that whole game. I didn't play with a guide or anything, so I didn't 100% it, but I got 75% completion, for anyone curious. Metroid Zero Mission is one of my favorite games. It is, I think, easily the best 2D Metroid. It is just such a fucking masterpiece. It is right up there, I think, with Resident Evil 1 on GameCube for, like, the title of best video game remake ever. Just so... And honestly, I was texting my brother about this last night. I think part of what sapped my enthusiasm for FF7 Rebirth was playing Metroid Zero Mission and being like, this is what a remake should be. This is like such a perfect example of like, it is a really, if you don't know Zero Mission, it is the NES game completely rebuilt with mechanics from Super Metroid and Metroid Fusion, and then some new mechanics as well. And it's got a bunch of really big surprises, including a whole other section at the end of the game. And so it is both, it's like this best of both worlds. You get this faithful recreation of everything that was good and special about NES Metroid, plus all this new amazing stuff to make kind of the ultimate 2D Metroid game. That is, I think that and Metroid Prime are probably the two best Metroid games. And it's just incredible. And I'm a little bit sad. I think if you were to split remakes into like categories, there's ports, which is you just put a game in its original code on a new system. There's remasters, which is like, you know, Uncharted the Nathan Drake Collection or Halo Master Chief Collection or something like that, right? You just spruce up the visuals, put them on a new system. There's remakes, like a graphical remake, which is something like Crisis Core Reunion, right? Where you like take the basic game but redo the graphics. And then there's like big-ass remakes like Metroid Zero Mission, Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, all of those kind of games, right? And the thing about the Final Fantasy VII Remake series is it fits into exactly none of those categories. It is not any kind of video game remake we've had before, and I'm not sure it has created a good new category to justify that.
Yeah, like it feels like it vaguely wants to be the video game version of the Neon Genesis Evangelion rebuild movies, but It does not have anywhere near the sort of like insight or confidence to break out of the shell of remaking the original story, which is what those rebuild movies did, right? And by the time you're like partway through the second one of those, it's different. And then by the time you get to the third rebuild movie, you are no longer even anywhere near the confines of the story of the TV show that it's quote unquote remaking. And remake / rebirth so far And, I haven't finished Rebirth, but I have my strong suspicions about what this game will do at the end to replicate the same kind of thing Remake did at the end to sort of make you think it's doing something new, but actually keeping the status quo functionally the same. It's interested in keeping that status quo functionally the same. I think these games are afraid of trying to go too far afield and break the story of the original Final Fantasy VII in order to do something new. At the same time, they don't want to do, for whatever reason, maybe they think that people would get bored by it because they already know the story. I do not know why, but they do not want to just replicate the story of Final Fantasy VII in some form or reimagine it, but within the general confines of what the original game was, a la a Resident Evil 4 remake or something like that, which makes notable changes and reimagines large stretches of the story, but still is like, from a big picture perspective, fundamentally the same plot line. And it's just this thing of where they kind of don't go one way or the other with it. And that's a very frustrating place to be in, because I neither get the sort of radical, deconstruction of that original story that makes me rethink it in so many ways, which is what the Eva Rebuild movies do. By the time you get to the fourth Rebuild movie, your like whole understanding of Eva as like a big picture media entity is so different because it's changed so much in the like self-reflection that Anno has in the fourth movie, looking back on what the attitude of that original series and End of Evangelion were and how his attitude has changed and evolved and grown is really remarkable and such a cool story to tell. These games so far are not doing that, nor are they giving me the kind of Resident Evil 4 remake experience of looking at this story and seeing different shades of these characters and different shades of this world that maybe are kind of there or kind of buried in that original story, but because of the nature of how it was presented, never really came to the surface. And you get flashes of that in the remake games, but only flashes of it because it's so stretched out, it's so padded, and it has so much like kind of meandering nonsense that dilutes any of the like the meaningful narrative content, that side of it is preciously rare. And so that's the thing that from a narrative perspective, I think is hugely frustrating about the kind of way they're trying to remake those games.
And from a mechanical perspective, it's also not doing the Metroid Zero Mission thing of taking the original gameplay loop and kind of modernizing it and making it snappier and tighter, because none of the gameplay of 7 is in this. It's a different combat system. It's not even like a new version of a turn-based combat system. It's just an unrelated kind of combat system that, like, if you liked the one in FF7, there's no guarantee you'll like this or vice versa, right? They're just different.
Yeah.
And Rebirth is this big, like, open world Ubisoft style game. Remake was a corridor game. Final Fantasy VII on PlayStation was neither of those. It was a classical JRPG. So yeah, I know we're repeating ourselves, but I just thought it was interesting because I was playing Zero Mission and I was thinking about remakes. And I think, does that kind of like, I laid out like a 4-part, like, I think that's the right kind of categorization for how these things generally fall. And I think it explains why Remake and Rebirth are so weird. They don't fall into any category we have for video game remakes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's how I would define them as well. And that like fourth category is in general a relatively modern category. Like you have a few of them, like Zero Mission and Resident Evil 1 Remake. But in general, most of those are like a pretty new phenomenon of where, Capcom going back and redoing 2, 3, 4 for Resident Evil and stuff like that. And it feels like a thing that's happening more and more. You have like the Demon's Souls remake on PS5, or in like the Ratchet and Clank 1 remake on PS4.
Yes.
And so it's just kind of like an interesting thing where I think, it's driven both by the age of the video game industry and our kind of like franchise-driven media thing that we've been in for a long time with this kind of like, fearing trying to do new IP because it's so risky, that you're getting a lot more of these kinds of big remake/reimaginings of older classic games. And yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake/Rebirth/ whatever the third one's going to be is in some kind of weird no man's land within those projects.
Yeah. But anyway, Analog Pocket, I'm still loving it. It was such a joy to play Zero Mission that way on an original cart. In that level of quality. I think one of the things I realized playing this and some other Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games I've tried on this device is these games are just so much more beautiful than I think we give them credit for today when you're looking at them through emulation, not on any kind of pixel mapped screen. I think you lose so much of the and when you're blowing them up to big sizes and stuff, on the Analog Pocket screen where it is this just perfect emulation, not just of the hardware, but of the screens and all those effects, but without the things like the dimness and the ghosting. Like, some of these games are just gorgeous. I was playing the beginning of Final Fantasy I, because I have the GBA Final Fantasy games, and I think those are still some of the best ways to play those games, because they were the last time that those teams came and did them with the original either Super NES or upgraded graphics. For Final Fantasy 1 and 2, it is the graphics taken from the, I think, Wonder Swan Color version that then went to PlayStation, then went to GBA, but they kept iterating on it, and it's for not a CRT screen, but, a very pixelated LCD, versus like the more modern versions, like the PSP remakes or the Pixel remasters, are done for modern displays where the pixel art can look nice, but I don't think it looks right. And so you're playing them on Analog Pocket or anything with that kind of display, and it just looks great. But anyway, I'm having fun with that. One other thing I had, fun's the wrong word with this week, my mind blown by, is I watched Berserk 1997.
Oh, yeah.
The 1997 adaptation of Berserk, which just got a Blu-ray release earlier this year from Discotek. This must be Discotek's best-selling release ever, because it has been basically out of print or out of stock everywhere. And like, I tried to get it when it first came out, and then I was like constantly refreshing Crunchyroll because I'd heard so much about this show over the years. And specifically, I want to shout out the video essayist Lady Emily has a good like intro guide to Berserk for people who didn't really know that series. And I had watched that a couple months ago. She talked about how great this anime is and that it's a good starting point for the series, which is a very big series, obviously. And then Discotek put this out, and I wanted to see it. And so we finally had a free week where we were not watching a long TV show for Japanimation Station. So I watched the 25 episodes of Berserk 1997, and this is like one of the 5 best anime I've ever seen in my life. This show is such an overwhelming, overpowering masterpiece. We will have to do some kind of podcast on it someday, Sean, because holy fucking crap. Have you seen this one? I'm curious.
I have not seen any of the anime versions of Berserk. I'm still waiting on because I've ordered that, but as you say, it's been out of, it's been out of stock. So I'm still waiting for mine to get here. But I read the manga, I mean, honestly, a while ago. But I've read the whole manga sans, like, maybe the last 10 chapters or so, probably done by Miura. And then he obviously the mangaka who passed away a few years ago, and then it's been taken up by like other people he had worked with and other manga artists that are continuing Berserk. But I'm for all intents and purposes, because of how slowly that series released, I more or less have seen functionally the whole manga or read it.
Yeah. So, and I am going to start reading the manga now. But I came into Berserk 97 cold. I had not seen or read any of it, and I just have to stress what, like, completely on its own terms, this thing is a fucking masterpiece. It does basically one episode at the beginning that does a little taste of the early arc of Berserk, the Black Swordsman stuff, and then it jumps into the Golden Age, and it does most of the Golden Age arc, although it ends at a very particular moment that I think is a perfect ending for this show, but it is not the actual ending of that arc in the manga, is my understanding. I went and looked that up. But it is a tremendous show. I think it works on its own terms. It is one of the great masterpieces of there's a technical term for this in animation studies, limited animation, which is to say it is not animating, on the ones and twos with a lot of, which is to say, like, new frames every second. It is a kind of animation where you are focusing more on sort of still imagery than you are on a lot of motion within the frame. And I've seen that referred to as like this show was low budget or had low production values. And I don't know how much money they spent on it. It's an astonishing looking show. It is made very much in the style of a 1960s or 70s anime, like either Toei's movies from the 60s, like The Great Adventure of Horus, Prince of the Sun, or like Osamu Dazaki's stuff from the 70s. It is very much in that style. The art director on this is the art director on a lot of that stuff I just named. He worked with Dazaki a lot. And so it is a show with a lot of those like harmony treatment, still images to do action scenes. It's got the most ravishing backgrounds you'll ever see in an anime. And then the other thing you just have to remember is that Kentaro Miura's art is ludicrously detailed. Like his character designs cannot be easily if you are going to translate them to animation, you have to do one of two things. You either have to simplify the designs so that there can be more motion and have more fluidity in being on and off model, because you cannot animate those characters on model with like an UFO table level of fluidity or something, right? It's just not going to be possible. Or you can do what they do in this, which is we're going to keep the animation pretty limited, but the characters are going to be like very on model to what his artwork looks like, kind of from start to finish. And I think it's the right call. I think they made all the right production decisions. And then it is directed just so brilliantly. Honestly, the thing that kept coming into my mind, and I know this is a weird connection, but is Orson Welles' European period, like his films like Chimes at Midnight or Othello, where he was working with not a lot of money, but the movies are so directorially brilliant, and they are so smart about every choice and every bit of economic storytelling they do that it does not matter. Like, it feels completely intentional. It does not feel like there's any accidents going on because of the budget. And that's the kind of show it is.
Yeah, awesome. Like, yeah, it's because what you're saying is interesting, because Berserk has had a couple of other attempts at adapting it into anime, none of which
terrible.
None of which as beloved as the 1997 show, where they made that trilogy of movies doing the Golden Age arc, and then they did the like very infamous 3D CG one from a while ago, which is picking up in the sort of like after the big flashback Golden Age. I say flashback. I mean, it's like 12 something volumes of the manga.
Yes.
It's the biggest, most elaborate flashback in the history of fucking flashbacks, but it is technically a flashback. So you have that other series, and that one is just like absolutely derided because it looks like utter garbage. I mean, it's like the thing that people point to when people point at like bad examples of 3D CG anime, and I think it was a show that helped contribute to the really harsh stigma that style has had for a while, even though there has been for a long time a good number of shows like Land of the Lustrous or Beastars, or there's a variety of them that are really good.
Land of the Lustrous premiered 1 year after Berserk 2016, and I think that's actually a really fascinating 1-2 punch, because those shows look like they are 3 decades apart in terms of like technology.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that, you know, the difficulty in adapting Berserk is exactly what you're saying, that like trying to bring that art into animation is really fucking hard, and trying to do right by it. And so doing it as a series of movies, like that makes sense as like a thing you would try to do, because it's like, well, doing it, the TV show thing is really hard. Why you would do a trilogy of movies adapting the same section of the manga that this already beloved show, both in Japan and over here, did, that's a more questionable thing. And recasting characters and all the stuff that did, why people don't go to that version. But then, you know, it's understandable then that's like, okay, if we want to do new Berserk stuff, let's do it as 3D CG. And I don't think that is inherently a bad choice. Like, I think you could do that. Obviously, that team just didn't do it well. I'm sure there are lots of reasons why they couldn't. But that, like, I can imagine a team doing a really good version of Berserk with 3D CG animation, because that, I think, is in some ways, if you want to get all the movement, that's probably like the easier way to do it. It is more viable. But if you want to keep that more the sort of the heart of the aesthetic from Murata's art, you have to keep it 2D. And so having the more limited animation in a kind of Dezaki style, that's like the thing you kind of have to do. That's it's kind of an interesting example, because most manga art is not like Berserk's. And so most manga art does not have this difficulty in translation. And then there are lots of other notable series like Vagabond that are kind of in that style that also just don't have anime adaptations. And that's probably one of the main reasons why.
Yeah, it's a really interesting case. But the cool thing about the 97 show is just it does stand tall on its own. It does not need like a season 2. It tells a complete story as a sliver of this larger work that Miura wrote. But it does stand on its own. And yeah, the fact that they recast the actors is like boggles my mind, because the cast for 97 is so good. Like Nobutashi Kana as Guts. Like, oh, that's why they cast him as Lancer in Fate Zero. It's just like, oh, obviously he is so phenomenal. Although the one recast that does amuse me is that Griffith in 97 Berserk is the actor who does Sephiroth, and Griffith in the later stuff is the actor who does Cloud. And Cloud and Sephiroth are two characters who are basically just stolen from Berserk. So it is like, hilarious to me that their two actors who do Griffith are Cloud and Sephiroth. That's great.
Yes. Yeah, and now that you've seen Berserk, you know where all like dark fantasy stuff from Japan, where all of that stuff goes, like all the like designs from Dark Souls and all of that shit. Yeah, like a lot of those 90s JRPGs, like Berserk is the thing that helps spawn so many of those kind of artistic trips for sure.
Oh, I mean, in the first episode, Guts gets out the Dragon Slayer, his big sword, and I'm like, why has he got a Buster Sword? And then I went, oh, that's where the Buster Sword is from. It was just taken from Berserk. And then, yes, the final couple episodes of Berserk 97, where they rescue Griffith, and then Griffith, let's just say, makes a choice.
Yeah, the very, very happy ending to the Golden Age arc where like Griffith just makes a really good choice and everybody ends happily ever after. Yeah.
He makes a choice, and that basically, those couple of episodes, and I assume that set of chapters from the manga, is just the Hidetaka Miyazaki origin story, because it is like Dark Souls, the TV show, for a couple episodes there, and holy crap. I was thinking last time, like, man, I would love a Berserk video game, and then I went, I have a Berserk video game. It's called Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne and Elden Ring. I can go play the Berserk video game to my heart's content.
Yeah, it's funny because like this is sort of like, I mean, it is connected to Berserk, but it's sort of like a long chain. But I was during one of my very mind-numbing showing the kids Gnomeo Juliet sessions, I ended up just looking at art by Hieronymus Bosch, the Renaissance painter, because that Metaphor ReFantazio trailer, there was a new trailer for that game recently, and it like jumped out to me that there are a lot of references to Hieronymus Bosch's art, specifically the Garden of Earthly Pleasures, which that is also a key influence on Berserk. If people have not seen, it's not just Bosch. It's like a lot of those Renaissance artists that draw hell and demons and shit like that, which are just, it's some of the most radical fucking metal shit you've ever seen in your life. And they were doing that in like the 1500s. And that whole sequence with Griffith, it's very much like one of those scenes from the hell part of a triptych from the Renaissance period, painted by an artist like Hieronymus Bosch. It's like one of those come to life, and it's just amazing. Like all that stuff. It's so good. It's just so good.
Yeah. So anyway, I do now have on order, because everyone was saying, here's something I learned this week, Sean, is if you want to get your tweets some traffic, just tweet about Berserk. People love talking about Berserk online. It's great. So no, I woke up to like, I think 18 Twitter notifications this morning from just people talking about Berserk in my mentions. But everyone was saying you got to read the manga, and then everyone's saying you got to get these, the Dark Horse omnibus editions. So I did order the first one of those last night. Those are the ones that are like actual, like, it wasn't published in Shonen Jump, but like Shonen Jump, like, manga magazine size editions is in hardcover, and I'm excited for that to come and to take a look at that art in that ridiculous oversized edition.
Yeah, because that's definitely a thing where you need, like, I just read it digitally, but you need like a big screen or a big page to capture what that art is doing. Yeah, just like one of the insane things about Berserk as a series is that, that Golden Age arc thing is as long as a long-running manga series. Like, it's huge. But it also is like a big flashback, so you have like a couple of volumes in the quote-unquote present day establishing Guts as a demon hunter. Then you have this insane massive flashback, and then you come back, and then there's like 20-something volumes of him back in that present day hunting demons and doing all that stuff and pushing the plot forward. It's just an insane structure for a story. And I can only imagine if you were someone reading it at the time, it just must have been insane being like, God, when are we ever going to go, like, when is this going to reconjoin with the first 3 volumes and all what that stuff was doing? But you can definitely see some of that structural influence on things like Full Metal Alchemist, which doesn't do as ridiculous a version of it. It's not so big, but it, like the beginning of Full Metal Alchemist, I think I mentioned on the podcast at the time when we covered those, it reminded me a lot of Berserk, of starting with a kind of story arc in the present day and saying, man, what's with all these crazy characters? And oh my God, he's got a mechanical arm thing. And then you go back and see, okay, what are all the steps that happened in this big, like, multi-volume flashback to bring us back to this point and then continue on the story. And there are plenty of other manga that do that. I don't know if Berserk necessarily created that structure, but definitely is the thing I think of whenever I see that in a storyline, because Berserk just did it to such a crazy degree.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll have to talk about Berserk more one day. There's not going to be a Berserk season of Japan Animation Station because there's only one anime worth talking about, I think. But
Yeah, it might be a one-off episode again. Like I have mine. Yeah. I'll get that set whenever it gets here, and I'll watch it. So yeah.
No, because that Discotek set has sold. It sold so well. It was in the top 10 U.S. Blu-rays for the week it came out, which does not happen for. I mean, Discotek is they're wonderful, but they're a very small label. They're an indie label. They put out like the Lupin the Third TV specials, that's like they get all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's rare that they get to handle a property that's as popular as something like Berserk. But they did a great job, by the way. I mean, this Blu-ray is fucking gorgeous. There's like 3 shots over the course of the show I counted that I think had to be upconverted from SD, probably because the film master was lost somewhere along the way. This is just a master from Japan. They didn't, Discotek didn't make it, but they authored it very well. It looks very good on the Blu-ray discs. And as they recommended, if you have a copy of Avengers Age of Ultron in its red Blu-ray case, you can get that out, and it looks very good for Berserk, because it comes in a normal Blu-ray blue case. But I did the recommended swap, because this is definitely better than Avengers Age of Ultron.
Unfortunately, I don't own Avengers Age of Ultron. Maybe I can go find it in a bargain bin somewhere.
Yes.
And just pick it up super cheap to do that trick.
All right. Well, Sean, I think that does it for this week. Just a short, fun little episode to talk about Berserk and Criterion and Gnomeo and Juliet. What the fuck am I going to title this episode?
This was a very Weekly Stuff episode.